Hello, and thank you for being here. My name is Sarah. I'm 40 years old, and for most of my adult life, I've worked as a landscape architect, designing spaces for other people to build their memories in. I always believed that family was the bedrock of everything, the one safe harbor in any storm. I believed that right up until the day my own siblings sold that harbor, our childhood home, right out from under me, for a pile of cash. They called me sentimental, impractical, and foolish. They sneered at my love for a place they saw only as an asset on a balance sheet. But they forgot one small, crucial detail. They forgot about the long, winding road that led to the house, and they forgot about the man who gave it to me. What they didn't know was that our grandfather, years before, had handed me the one key that could lock them out of their own greed. And when they, along with the furious developer they'd sold our legacy to, finally stood before the gate I had installed, they were about to learn the true price of what they had done. Before I tell you exactly how a single iron gate and a faded property deed brought a multi-million-dollar development to a screeching halt, I'd love it if you'd let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It's always so comforting to know how far these stories travel and who they reach. And if you've ever felt underestimated or betrayed by the very people who should have had your back, go ahead and hit that like button so I know I'm not alone. And for all the new viewers, please consider subscribing. This is a community of people who understand that sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one you should have listened to all along. The story of the house and the road really begins with my grandfather, Arthur. He wasn't a man of grand pronouncements or flowery speeches. His wisdom was etched into the calluses on his hands and delivered in quiet observations as we worked the land together. While my parents, bless their hearts, were softer, more occupied with the day-to-day of raising 3 children, Grandpa Arthur was made of the same earth he tended. He was my compass, my North Star. My brother Mark and my sister Chloe never quite understood him. To them, he was just an old man who smelled of soil and pipe tobacco. Someone who told boring stories about the Great Depression and the proper way to plant a dogwood tree. Mark, even as a boy, was obsessed with numbers, with value, with what things were worth. Chloe was obsessed with appearances, with what people thought of her. They would sit on the porch, fidgeting and bored, while I would follow Grandpa into the woods or down to the creek, my small hand lost in his enormous one. He taught me the names of the trees, the language of the birds, the quiet patience of growing things. He saw something in me that even my parents sometimes missed. He saw a steward. The property wasn't just a house on a plot of land. It was 40 acres of rolling Virginia countryside, a patchwork of old-growth forest, wildflower meadows, and a patient, meandering creek. The house itself was a simple, sturdy farmhouse built by my great-grandfather, with a wide, welcoming porch and windows that seemed to pull the sunlight deep into its wooden bones. It was the backdrop to every significant memory of my childhood. Christmases with the scent of pine and baking bread, summers spent catching fireflies in the meadow, autumns where the world turned to gold and crimson. For me, the land was alive. It had a soul. For Mark and Chloe, it was the place we had to go for holidays. A bit rustic, a bit boring, a place without good cell service. I was 16, the day my grandfather gave me the road. It was a sweltering August afternoon. We had spent the morning clearing brush from the edges of the long gravel lane that was the only way in or out of our property. It snaked for over a mile from the main county highway, dipping and rising with the contours of the land, flanked by ancient, moss-covered stone walls he had spent a lifetime maintaining. We were sitting on the tailgate of his old Ford pickup, sharing a thermos of lemonade, when he handed me a long, stiff envelope. "What's this, Grandpa?" I asked, wiping the sweat from my brow. He took a slow sip from his thermos, his pale blue eyes fixed on the ribbon of road disappearing into the trees. "It's the future, Sarah Belle," he said, his voice a low rumble, or a piece of it, anyway. Inside the envelope was a deed, a real legal deed, with my name on it. Sarah Annabelle Carter. The document, filled with dense legal language, transferred ownership of a single peculiar parcel of land to me. It was a long, thin strip, precisely the dimensions of the private road, from the highway entrance to the cattle guard, at the edge of the main property. "I don't understand," I said, looking from the paper to his weathered face. "You're giving me the driveway." As we grew into adults, the paths my siblings and I took diverged, exactly as Grandpa Arthur would have predicted. I went to college for landscape architecture, a path that felt like a natural extension of those days spent with him. I moved out of state to build a career, but a significant part of my heart, and my vacation time, always remained at the farm. Mark went into finance, climbing the corporate ladder in a city of steel and glass. His visits home becoming shorter and more infrequent, usually punctuated by calls he had to take on the porch about stock prices and quarterly earnings. Chloe married a wealthy man and dedicated herself to the art of being a socialite. Her life a curated collection of charity galas, European vacations, and judging others. To them, the farm became a symbol of a past they had outgrown. They saw it as charmingly rustic but inconvenient. They complained about the peeling paint on the shutters, the temperamental plumbing in the guest bathroom, the cost of property taxes. They didn't see the way the morning light filtered through the oak trees, or the resilience of the peonies that bloomed every June without fail. They just saw a liability. The decline of our parents was slow and then all at once, as it so often is. My father's heart grew weak, and my mother's memory began to fray at the edges. During those last few years, the distance between my siblings and me became a chasm. I was the one who arranged my schedule to make the 6-hour drive every other weekend. I was the one who sat with Dad on the porch, talking about everything and nothing. I was the one who learned to navigate the labyrinth of Mom's fading memories, gently guiding her back to the present. I replanted her favorite rose bushes, fixed the loose board on the porch swing, and coordinated with the home health aides. Mark would send money, a transaction that absolved him of the need to send himself. Chloe would call, her voice bright and brittle, for 10 minutes every Sunday, a performative check-in before she rushed off to a brunch or a gallery opening. "You're just so good at all that stuff, Sarah," she'd say. A statement that was meant as a compliment, but landed like a dismissal, a way of abdicating her own responsibility. They saw my dedication not as love, but as a lack of a real life of my own. My career, my friends, my world out of state, it was all secondary in their eyes to the unglamorous, unpaid work of caretaking. After they were both gone, the house fell into a profound silence. The grief was a physical weight, a constant ache in my chest. For me, the house was a repository of their spirits. I could still hear my father's laugh in the workshop, smell my mother's lavender soap in the bathroom. For Mark and Chloe, the silence was an opportunity. The period of mourning was, for them, a brief and inconvenient administrative delay. Less than a month after we buried our mother beside our father in the little church cemetery, Mark called for a family meeting to discuss the estate. We met at the house, the three of us, in the formal dining room we'd only ever used for Thanksgiving. The air was thick with unspoken things. Mark, ever the executive, had a leather-bound folio and a printed agenda. Chloe sat opposite me, scrolling through her phone, her expression one of pained tolerance. "All right," Mark began, tapping his pen on the table. "Let's be efficient about this." Mom and Dad named the three of us as co-executors, with decisions to be made by majority vote. The main asset, obviously, is the property. He slid a page across the table. It was a market analysis from a high-end real estate agency. The market is hot right now, especially for large parcels like this. Developers are paying a premium. He stared at the paper, feeling a wave of nausea. "You're already talking about selling?" Chloe finally looked up from her phone, her brow furrowed in annoyance. "Sarah, be realistic. What else would we do with it? None of us live here. It's a money pit. The taxes alone are astronomical, and it needs a new roof. The furnace is ancient. It's a constant drain. We could fix it up," I said, my voice sounding small even to my own ears. We could rent it out as a vacation home. We could keep it, for us, for our kids to visit one day. Mark let out a short, sharp laugh, devoid of humor. With what money, Sarah? Your landscape architect salary. Chloe's husband isn't going to fund your sentimental project, and I'm not sinking my capital into a depreciating asset. Selling is the only logical move. We split the proceeds 3 ways. It's clean, it's fair, and it's a significant windfall for all of us. Fair? I felt a flare of anger. What's fair about erasing everything? This is where we grew up. This is where Mom and Dad lived and died. Don't you feel anything? Chloe sighed dramatically. Oh, Sarah, don't be so emotional. It's just a house. We have the memories. You're letting your sentimentality cloud your judgment. It was their classic maneuver, teaming up, framing me as the irrational, emotional one, and them as the pragmatic, logical adults. They were gaslighting me, making my love for our home into a character flaw. I argued. I pleaded. I tried to make them see. I talked about Grandpa Arthur and the legacy of the land. They just exchanged a look, that familiar, weary look that said, "Here she goes again." The vote, of course, was 2-1. "We'll get it appraised and listed," Mark said, closing his folio with an air of finality. "We'll keep you in the loop on any offers." But the promise was hollow. I knew it then. I was being managed, not included. I drove back to my apartment, out of state, feeling utterly defeated, a profound sense of loneliness settling over me. The lines of communication went quiet. My calls and texts to Mark were met with brief, evasive replies. "Things are moving along, just dealing with the lawyers." It's a process. I felt a growing dread in the pit of my stomach. I was being shut out, and I knew it. The confirmation of their betrayal didn't come from a phone call or an email from my own siblings. It came from a sleek, targeted ad that appeared in my social media feed one Tuesday morning. It was from a luxury real estate developer. The ad showcased a new, exclusive community called Willow Creek Estates. The name was a sanitized, corporate version of the name of our little creek. My heart began to pound. And then I saw the artist's rendering. It was our house, but horribly altered. The porch was gone, replaced by faux Tuscan columns. The wildflower meadow was gone, paved over, and replaced with a grid of identical beige townhouses. The ancient oaks were gone, replaced with spindly, decorative saplings. It was a vision of a soulless, plasticized hellscape built on the grave of my family's history. Below the rendering, the text boasted of pre-construction opportunities in a premier location steeped in natural beauty. I felt the blood drain from my face. I could barely breathe. My hands were shaking as I dialed Mark's number. He answered on the 3rd ring, his voice breezy and distracted. "Hey, can't talk long. About to go into a meeting." "Willow Creek Estates," I said, my voice a choked whisper. "Tell me it's not our house, Mark. Tell me I'm crazy." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. The silence was his confession.
"Look,"
he finally said, his tone shifting from breezy to defensive. "It was an incredible offer, Sarah. A developer approached us directly. All cash, no contingencies, closed in 30 days. We had to move on it. It was too good to pass up." "You sold it," I whispered, the words feeling like shards of glass in my throat. "You sold it without telling me. Without my final signature. I told you, the estate allows for a majority decision." Chloe and I agreed. "It's done. The papers were signed last week. I was going to tell you once the money was in escrow." He wasn't sorry. There wasn't a hint of remorse in his voice. It was all business. "We did you a favor, Sarah. Your 1/3 of the sale, it's life-changing money. We'll wire it to you as soon as it clears. You should be thanking us." I couldn't speak. A wave of ice and fire washed over me. Betrayal so profound it felt like a physical blow. He had sold our home. He had sold our memories. He had sold the last tangible piece of our parents, and he was calling it a favor. "I have to go," he said, his voice impatient now, and he hung up. I sat there, phone in hand, staring at the glossy, horrifying image of Willow Creek Estates on my computer screen. The tears that came weren't just tears of grief, they were tears of rage. And in that moment, in the wreckage of my trust, a faint, long-forgotten echo surfaced in my mind. The voice of my grandfather. "It's your anchor, Sarah Bell. It's the only way in." The days that followed were a blur of numb disbelief and searing anger. I'd be in the middle of a design meeting, sketching out a garden plan, and the image of those soulless townhouses would flash in my mind, and I'd have to excuse myself to the restroom to keep from crying out. The grief was for so much more than the house. It was the final brutal confirmation that the family I thought I had, the one I kept trying to believe in, was a fiction. My siblings and I were not a team. We were not bound by love and shared history. We were just three people who shared DNA, and for two of them, that bond was weaker than the pull of a large check. I felt like a fool, a sentimental, naive fool, who had kept offering her heart to people who saw it as nothing more than a nuisance. The money they offered felt like an insult, a bribe to shut me up and make me accept the desecration. I hadn't responded to the email from Mark's lawyer, asking for my bank details for the wire transfer. I let it sit in my inbox, a testament to a transaction I refused to bless. One rainy Saturday, I couldn't stand being in my apartment anymore. I needed to do something, anything, to feel less helpless. I started cleaning, a frantic, purging kind of cleaning. I pulled out old boxes from the back of my closet, filled with college papers and old photographs. In the bottom of one, I found the keepsake box. It was a simple cedar box Grandpa Arthur had made for me when I was 10. Inside, beneath a bundle of his letters, tied with a faded ribbon, and a collection of brittle, pressed flowers from the farm's meadow, was the stiff, long envelope. My hands trembled as I pulled it out. The deed. I uncreased the heavy paper, yellowed at the folds, and spread it out on my coffee table. There it was, in crisp, legal type: Grant, Deed, Parcel 7B, Willow County. And there was my name, Sarah Annabelle Carter. I pulled out the accompanying survey map. It was exactly as I remembered, a long, thin, rectangular strip. Willow Creek Lane. The map showed the main property, the 40 acres of the farm, as a large, contiguous square. In this parcel, my parcel, was the stem connecting that square to the outside world. I sat there, staring at it, for a long time. My grandfather's words came back to me, not as a faint echo this time, but as a clear, resonant command. It's separate. It's your anchor. It's the only way in. Don't you ever let it go for less than it's worth to you. What was it worth to me? It wasn't worth a third of the sale price. It wasn't worth any amount of money that would be spent on a new car or a bigger apartment. Its worth was incalculable. Its worth was the house itself. Its worth was the memory of my parents and the foresight of my grandfather. A thought, cold and hard and bright as a diamond, began to form in my mind. It was a wild, audacious thought, born of grief and rage, but it felt right. It felt like justice. The following Monday, I started making calls, not to my siblings, but to lawyers. I found a small, highly rated firm in Willow County, my parents' home county. I made an appointment with a partner named Evelyn Reed. On the phone, I gave her the bare-bones version of the story. She was professional, but audibly skeptical. "Miss Carter, I understand you're upset, but if the developer bought the property, a title search would have been performed. They almost certainly have a recorded easement for access. It's standard procedure." "I don't think they do," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I think the property is landlocked." "That's highly unlikely," she said. A polite way of saying she thought I was a grieving woman, grasping at straws. "But I'm happy to look into it for you. Could you send me a copy of the deed you mentioned?" I emailed her a scan of my grandfather's deed and the survey map. I spent the next 24 hours in a state of agitated suspense. What if I had misunderstood? What if there was some legal loophole, some fine print that made my ownership of the road meaningless? My phone rang at 4 o'clock the next day. It was Evelyn. Her voice was completely different. The professional skepticism was gone. replaced by a tone of stunned, almost gleeful, disbelief. "My God," she said, without even a hello. "I've been a real estate attorney in this state for 30 years, and I have never seen anything like this." "So it's real?" I asked, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Real, Miss Carter. It's a work of art. I pulled the deeds for your parents' property, and every adjacent parcel. I've cross-referenced everything with the county clerk. Your grandfather didn't just give you the road. He structured it with the precision of a surgeon. The deed to the main house makes no mention of an easement. There is no easement by necessity, because he intentionally created the landlocked situation when he severed the road from the main parcel. There is no prescriptive easement, because your family owned both parcels for decades. He locked it down 6 ways from Sunday. The property is utterly, completely, and legally landlocked, without your consent to cross your parcel." She let out a low whistle. "Frankly, the developer's legal team committed malpractice on a scale that could get them disbarred." Or she paused. "Your siblings committed outright fraud by attesting that the property had legal deeded access when they sold it. Either way, you, Miss Carter, are holding all the cards." Relief washed over me, so potent it made me dizzy. I wasn't crazy. My grandfather had seen this coming. He had seen the greed in my siblings, long before I was willing to, and he had forged me a shield. "What can I do?" I asked Evelyn. "What are my options?" "Well," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice, "you could sue them for trespassing the moment their first bulldozer rolls onto your land. You could negotiate a hefty fee for an access easement. We could probably get you a 7-figure settlement without even breaking a sweat. What is it you want?" I thought of the soulless rendering of Willow Creek Estates. I thought of my father's workshop, my mother's garden. I thought of Mark's condescending laugh and Chloe's dismissive sigh. My goal wasn't to be rich. My goal wasn't just to punish them. It was to undo what they had done. "I want the house back," I said, the words clear and firm. There was a pause on Evelyn's end. I could practically hear the gears turning in her brilliant legal mind. "The house back," she repeated slowly. "That's poetic and ambitious. I like it." She was quiet for another moment. "Okay, a lawsuit is messy and takes time. A settlement for cash is easy, but doesn't get you the house. But a lease agreement, a lease is a private contract. We can put whatever terms we want in it. A very, very specific lease." The plan we hatched over the next week was simple in its execution and breathtaking in its audacity. We weren't going to ask for damages. We weren't going to negotiate an easement. We were going to offer the developer, a company called Titan Homes, a one-time perpetual lease to use my road. The price for this lease would be non-negotiable. It would be the exact amount Titan Homes had paid for the house and the 40 acres, plus an additional sum to cover all the legal fees, closing costs, and a small symbolic premium for my emotional distress. The money would be paid into an escrow account and would be used for one purpose and one purpose only: to buy the property back from them at the price they had paid. It was a perfectly balanced equation. They would be made whole, financially. My siblings would be cut out entirely, and I would get my home back. Evelyn was practically giddy. "It's beautiful," she said, reviewing the final draft of the lease agreement. "They can't claim we're being extortionate because we're not asking for a penny more than what's needed to reverse the original transaction. It's a clean, elegant, and absolutely brutal solution." Armed with a plan and a brilliant lawyer, I felt a shift inside me. The helpless grief began to recede, replaced by a cold, calm resolve. The next step had to be taken, not on paper, but on the ground. I took a week off work and flew to Virginia. I didn't go to the house. I couldn't bear to see it yet. Instead, I drove directly to a local company that specialized in commercial fencing and security. I ordered the heaviest duty steel gate they sold, the kind used for industrial parks and high security facilities. It was 16 feet wide, powder-coated black, and utterly uncompromising. 2 days later, I stood on the side of the county highway and watched as a crew of workmen dug deep holes and set 2 massive steel posts in a ton of concrete. They worked with loud, efficient machinery, the sounds of their labor a stark contrast to the peaceful country quiet. I watched them hang the gate, a solid wall of black steel. The final clang as the lock latched into place was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of a door closing on the past, and another one, a much more fortified one, opening to the future. I had a sign made, simple and professional, a dark green background with crisp white letters. It read, "Private Property, Willow Creek Lane, LLC, access by appointment only. All trespassers will be prosecuted." I zip-tied it to the center of the gate. Then I got back in my rental car, drove to the airport, and flew home. The trap was set. Now, all I had to do was wait for the animals to walk into it. I didn't have to wait long. 3 days later, my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number from Willow County I didn't recognize. I took a deep breath, centered myself, and answered with the calm, professional tone Evelyn and I had rehearsed. Sarah Carter speaking. "Miss Carter, this is Daniel Thompson, CEO of Titan Homes." The voice on the other end said. It was smooth, confident, and dripping with the easy authority of a man used to getting his way. "I'm calling because it seems one of your neighbors has mistakenly put a gate up at the entrance to my new development, Willow Creek Estates. It's blocking my crews from starting preliminary site work. I was hoping you might know who I could talk to about getting it removed promptly." I let a small silence hang in the air before I replied. "There's no mistake, Mr. Thompson. That's my gate." There was a beat of confused silence. "Your gate? I'm sorry. I think you misunderstand. That road is the access point for my property, the 40-acre parcel I just purchased from the Carter estate." "I understand that you purchased the 40-acre parcel." "Yes," I said, my voice remaining placid and even. "But you didn't purchase the road that leads to it. That parcel, Willow Creek Lane, belongs to me. It's private property." The silence on his end was longer this time, charged with dawning comprehension and annoyance. "Now, hold on a minute," he said, his smooth tone cracking just a little. "My legal team did a title search. Access has to be included. I would advise you to have your legal team look again, a little more closely this time," I replied, a cool edge creeping into my voice. "You'll find that there is no recorded easement. Your property is, I believe the legal term is, landlocked." I could almost hear his mind racing, the gears grinding as he processed the impossible. I heard him mutter something profane under his breath. "This is absurd," he finally sputtered. "You can't just block access to my land. That's illegal." "On the contrary, Mr. Thompson," I said, channeling Evelyn's confident precision. "What would be illegal is for your crews to cut my lock and trespass on my land. But I'm a reasonable person. I'm perfectly willing to discuss granting you access." A wave of relief washed into his voice. "A wave? Okay, good." For a moment there, "Look, let's not make this difficult. I'm prepared to offer you a fair price for an easement. Say $5,000 for the trouble." I almost laughed. The sheer arrogance was stunning. "I'm afraid you misunderstand," I said, my voice turning to ice. "I'm not interested in selling an easement. However, I am willing to offer you a perpetual lease for use of the road. I have an agreement already drafted by my attorney." "A lease," he said, wary now. "Fine. A lease. What are you looking for? $1,000 a month? $2,000? The terms are much simpler than that," I said. "It's a one-time, non-negotiable lease payment." "Fine," he said, his patience clearly gone. "How much? Just give me the number." I took a quiet breath. This was it, the moment of impact. "The price for a perpetual access lease for Willow Creek Lane," I stated, my voice as clear and cold as a winter morning, "is $1,842,000. The silence that followed was the most profound silence I have ever heard over a telephone. It was a silence so complete, I thought he might have had a heart attack. I could hear his faint, ragged breathing. When he finally spoke, his voice was a strangled gasp. "What did you say?" $1,842,000, I repeated, enunciating every syllable. That's insane. That's more than I paid for the entire property." "I know," I said softly. "The price is $1.8 million. which was your purchase price. The additional $42,000 covers my legal fees, the cost of the gate, and other administrative expenses. The funds are to be paid to an escrow account, managed by my attorney. Upon receipt of the funds, my attorney is authorized to execute a purchase of the main property from you, for the exact price you paid for it. In short, Mr. Thompson, you sign the lease, you get your money back, and you walk away from a very bad investment with your shirt on your back. Or you don't, and you own 40 beautiful, completely inaccessible acres of Virginia woodland. The choice is yours. I heard a string of curses, followed by the sound of the phone being slammed down so hard I imagined it cracking. I hung up, my hand shaking, but a fierce, triumphant joy was singing in my veins. The first shot had been fired. The real battle, I knew, was about to begin. True to form, the next call I received wasn't from Thompson or his lawyers. It was from Mark. His voice was a whip crack of fury. "Sarah, what in the hell do you think you're doing? I just got off the phone with Daniel Thompson. He's threatening to sue us for fraud. He says you've blocked the road." I waited for him to finish his tirade. "Hello, Mark," I said calmly. "Yes, I did put up a gate. On my property. Your property. It's a driveway. For God's sake, this isn't a game, Sarah. You're going to destroy us." Chloe is hysterical. "You have to take that gate down, right now." "No," I said. The word was small, but it felt as solid as the steel gate itself. "I don't think I will." A sputtering sound came from his end. He was so accustomed to me backing down, to me being the reasonable one, that my simple refusal short-circuited his brain. A few hours later, they were there. I knew they would be. I got a text from a friend who lived down the county highway. "There's a circus forming at the entrance to your parents' old road. A fancy black SUV and a big developer's truck. Looks tense." I had been waiting in a nearby town for this exact moment. I drove there and parked my rental car a discreet distance away, walking the final 100 yards. The scene was just as my friend described. Mark's gleaming black SUV was parked haphazardly, door ajar. Chloe was standing beside it, her arms crossed, her face a mask of pinched fury. Mark was pacing back and forth in front of the gate, phone pressed to his ear, his face flushed red. Parked behind them was Daniel Thompson's enormous Ford F-350, and he was leaning against it, looking thunderous. A few construction workers, who had presumably been turned away, were lingering in their own trucks, watching the drama unfold with open curiosity. It was a perfect, public stage. I walked toward them, my footsteps steady on the gravel shoulder. Chloe saw me first. "There she is," she shrieked, pointing a perfectly manicured finger at me. "Sarah, you have to end this madness right now." Mark hung up his phone and strode toward me. "Have you lost your mind?" he seethed, keeping his voice low but intense. "Thompson's lawyers are drafting a lawsuit against us for misrepresentation and fraud. They could take everything, Sarah. Our houses, our savings, everything. That sounds like a problem you and Chloe created when you sold a property without ensuring it had legal access," I said, my voice quiet, but carrying in the still air. Thompson pushed himself off his truck and lumbered over, his face a mottled purple. "Enough games, lady. Take down the gate, now, or my next call is to a judge, to get an emergency injunction." "You can try," I said, looking him directly in the eye. "But you have no legal standing. This road is my property. It was given to me, years ago, by my grandfather." I let my gaze drift to my siblings. "Grandpa Arthur, you remember him, don't you? The man whose home you just sold off to the highest bidder." Chloe flinched. Mark's jaw tightened. "He knew," I continued, the words coming easily now. "He saw this day coming. He knew you two would see this land as nothing more than a checkbook. He told me people like you would come along, people who only understood the word value when it had a dollar sign in front of it." "This is blackmail," Mark hissed. "It's not blackmail, Mark. It's contract law," I said, my voice hardening. "It's the consequence of your own actions. You lied, you cheated, and you got caught." I turned back to the developer. But as I told you on the phone, Mr. Thompson, I am prepared to offer a solution. I reached into the tote bag on my shoulder and pulled out a crisp manila folder. I held it out. Here it is. The lease agreement my lawyer drafted. The terms are simple, and they are non-negotiable. Thompson snatched the folder from my hand and ripped it open. Mark and Chloe crowded behind him, peering over his shoulder. I watched their faces as they read. I saw Thompson's eyes scan the page, his expression shifting from anger to disbelief to pure, sputtering outrage. I saw Chloe's hand fly to her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. I saw the color drain from Mark's face, leaving him looking pale and suddenly old. 1.84 million, Thompson choked out, waving the paper in the air. This is insane. It's the price, I said, my voice ringing with a finality that silenced them all. It's the exact price you paid for the property, plus my expenses. It's the price of making this right. And what happens to our share? Chloe whispered, her voice trembling. What about the money you promised us, Mark? I looked at my sister, at the raw, selfish panic in her eyes, and I felt nothing but a cold, distant pity. Here is no share for you, I said to her. The money from this lease doesn't go to me. It goes into escrow to buy my house back. You wanted the cash value of the property so badly? Well, there it is. Mr. Thompson is going to pay it, and then he's going to sue you to get it back. You get the one thing you ever cared about, the money and all the consequences that come with it. I turned to Thompson, who was still staring at the paper as if it were written in a demonic script. Your choice is yours, Mr. Thompson. Your investment is currently worth $0. You can stand here and yell, or you can call your lawyer and accept the only deal that gets you out of this hole. My lawyer, Evelyn Reed, is expecting your call. And with that, I turned my back on them. I walked away from the gate, from the idling trucks, from the shocked and furious faces of my siblings and their victim. I didn't look back. I got in my car and drove away, leaving them standing there in the dust and wreckage of their own greed. The days immediately following the confrontation at the gate were a storm of frantic, impotent rage directed entirely at me. My phone lit up with calls and texts from Mark and Chloe, which I ignored, and a series of blustering emails from Daniel Thompson's legal team, which I forwarded directly to Evelyn. The siblings' messages were a chaotic mix of threats, accusations, and pathetic attempts at emotional manipulation. You're tearing this family apart, Chloe texted, a message so breathtakingly ironic, I almost laughed out loud. Mark tried a different, more insidious tactic. He left a long, rambling voicemail, his voice strained with false sincerity, talking about Mom and Dad, and how they would be so disappointed to see us like this. He was trying to wield my love for them as a weapon against me, a tactic so transparent and vile, it only strengthened my resolve. It was all noise. For the first time in my life, I was able to tune them out, to see their frantic attempts to control me for what they were, the death throes of a power dynamic I had just definitively shattered. All communication was routed through Evelyn. She was my rock, my firewall. She dealt with the blustering threats from Thompson's lawyers with cool, surgical precision. They threatened to sue for an easement by necessity. Evelyn calmly emailed them the relevant case law and a copy of my grandfather's meticulously structured deed, proving it didn't apply. They threatened to challenge the legality of the road as a separate parcel. She sent them the county records of the property being surveyed and legally severed decades ago. Every angle they tried, every loophole they searched for, they hit the solid brick wall of my grandfather's foresight. Their case was built on sand, and they were beginning to realize it. The real pressure point, as Evelyn had predicted, was the lawsuit Titan Homes was now aiming squarely at Mark and Chloe. Thompson's lawyers had filed a suit for fraudulent misrepresentation and were seeking not only the full purchase price of the property back, but also punitive damages for the holding costs, mobilization fees for the construction crews, and the legal expenses he was now incurring. My siblings were staring down the barrel of total financial ruin. The pressure worked. After a week of frantic legal maneuvering that went nowhere, Evelyn received a call, It was from the senior partner at the law firm representing Titan Homes. The bluster was gone, replaced by a tone of weary resignation. "My client is prepared to accept your client's terms," he said, the words tasting like defeat. "He wants out. He wants this over." The process from there was swift and clinical. Lawyers spoke to lawyers. Documents were couriered back and forth. An escrow account was established. I had to fly back one last time to sign the final papers in Evelyn's office. As I put my pen to the signature line on the document that would transfer a seven-figure sum in exchange for access to my road, and the second document that would use that same sum to transfer the deed of the main property back to me, I felt a profound sense of peace. It wasn't giddy triumph. It was a quiet, deep satisfaction. The closing was completed electronically. I watched my email, and an hour later, 2 messages arrived almost simultaneously. The first was a confirmation from the escrow company that the funds had been transferred. The second was from the county clerk's office, with a digital copy of the newly recorded deed. The house, the land, the woods, the creek. It was all mine. Evelyn and I went out for a celebratory dinner that night. "You know," she said, raising her wine glass, "in 30 years of practice, I've had clients win big monetary settlements. I've had clients get their day in court, but I have never ever had a client get justice this poetic." "It wasn't about the money," I said, clinking my glass against hers. "It was about the principle." "My dear," she said, with a wry smile, "the most satisfying victories are always the ones where the principal comes with a house and 40 acres attached." She told me that Thompson had immediately refocused his lawsuit on my siblings. With the fraud now so clearly established, he had them dead to rights. Their only hope of avoiding complete bankruptcy was to settle, and that would mean liquidating nearly everything they had. My final instruction to the gate company was to install a remote-operated motor. The gate would remain closed, but now I had the remote. The first time I drove up the road, after it was all over, was a surreal experience. I stopped at the gate, pressed the button on the small remote on my visor, and watched as it swung silently open for me. I drove slowly, taking in the familiar curves, the ancient stone walls, the canopy of trees overhead. This wasn't just a driveway anymore. It was a path I had reclaimed. It was a testament to a grandfather's love and a granddaughter's resolve. When I got to the house, it looked tired and a little forlorn, but it was still standing, still mine. The developer's crews had done some preliminary survey work, leaving behind colored flags and some churned-up earth near the meadow, but no real damage had been done. The house was safe. I walked onto the porch and sat on the swing, just as I had done so many times with my father. The silence was different now. It wasn't the silence of grief and loss. It was the silence of peace, of homecoming. The house had been through a battle, and it had won. We both had. I never went back to my old life, my old job. It felt like a costume that no longer fit. I sold my apartment out of state and moved into the house permanently. The first few months were a quiet joy. I tore out the gaudy, wilting annuals the real estate stagers had planted and began restoring my mother's gardens. I aired out the rooms, polished the old wood floors until they gleamed, and filled the space with life again. I started a small, local landscape architecture business, specializing in native plants and sustainable designs. My clients weren't wealthy developers. They were families who, like me, had a deep love for their small piece of the earth. The work was fulfilling in a way my old corporate job had never been. The fallout for my siblings was exactly as Evelyn had predicted. They were forced to sell their homes to settle the lawsuit with Titan Homes. Mark lost his multi-million-dollar house in the city. Chloe and her husband had to sell their sprawling suburban mansion and downsize significantly. Their fall from grace was swift, from what I heard through the local grapevine, brutal. About 6 months after I moved back, I received a letter. It was from Chloe. Her handwriting, usually so elegant and flowing, was shaky and tear-stained. It was a long, rambling letter, filled with self-pity. She wrote about how hard this had been for her, how unfair it was, how I had destroyed her life. Buried in the litany of complaints was a single sentence that was meant to be an apology. I guess I'm sorry if we hurt your feelings about the house. It wasn't remorse, it was regret that she had been caught. I folded the letter and put it away. It required no response. A few weeks later, an email from Mark appeared in my inbox. It was short and stiff. Sarah, I recognize that our handling of the estate was suboptimal. I apologize for the financial and emotional distress this has caused. I hope in time we can find a way to move forward as a family. Suboptimal. The word was so perfectly Mark, so clinical and devoid of genuine emotion. He wasn't sorry for the betrayal. He was sorry for the failed transaction. He wasn't apologizing for the pain he caused, but for the disastrous outcome it had produced for him. I thought about what to write back for a long time. I typed out angry responses and sad responses and forgiving responses. In the end, I deleted them all. I simply wrote back one sentence. The family you are referring to no longer exists. I wish you well. I hit send and felt a weight I hadn't even realized I was still carrying lift from my shoulders. The boundary was set. It was absolute. The silence that followed was a relief. And so, here I am. I'm sitting on the porch swing of my house, my home, watching the last rays of the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. The air smells of freshly cut grass and the night-blooming jasmine I planted near the steps. My dog, a rescue I named Arthur, is sleeping at my feet. My life is quiet, and it is full. The battle for this place taught me something profound. It wasn't truly about revenge. In the end, it was about reclamation. It was about honoring the love of the people who built this place, and the one man who had the wisdom to protect it, and me. It was about discovering that my own worth was not something that could be granted or withheld by my family. It existed on its own, solid and immovable, like the land beneath my feet. My siblings saw a property to be liquidated. My grandfather saw a legacy to be preserved. And I learned to see myself not as the sentimental, foolish girl they always painted me as, but as the steward my grandfather always knew I was. That's my story. It's the story of how I lost my home and fought to get it back, and how in the process, I found myself. The greatest lesson I learned through all of this is that sometimes the deepest roots are the ones you have to fight for. And that family isn't just about the blood you share, but about the love you're given and the respect you command. Thank you so much for listening to me, for giving me this space to share what happened. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to fight for something that was rightfully yours? How did you find the strength to stand your ground? Share your story in the comments below. This community is a place of strength, and your experience could be the very thing someone else needs to hear today. Please don't forget to like this video if my story resonated with you, and subscribe to the channel for more stories of resilience and vindication. Remember, your value is not determined by those who refuse to see it. It's written in every good thing you do and every challenge you overcome. Thank you again for joining me. I wish you all strength and peace.